Hey, a couple of quick things. Right? So I thought we were thinking about this, and as I was flying in yesterday, I was thinking about the talk that I'm going to do today and the things that I want to talk about. What does that relate to? Right? And I was watching a TED video, a wonderful Frenchman talking about it. I can't remember the name of it, but it was all about the age of productivity crisis that we're in right now. And what the gist of that entire conversation was, there's a strong and direct correlation between the rise of overhaul of productivity and how well off the next few generations are. Right? So it was very much about, I think I distilled down a couple of key thoughts from there. It only takes, maybe coming back for a second, the productivity, the rise in productivity has been dropping at a very steady rate across the entire globe. So Japan about 30 years ago was about 20% every year, dropping down to about 10 to about 5, and then closed really close to 0 across the globe at the moment. And how that affects everyone, right, is, so the research that they were doing kind of suggested that it only takes 3% productivity rise every year for the next generation to be twice as well off as the current one. If that drops to 1%, it takes 3 generations for the next generation to be as well off as the previous one. And we're close to 0. Right? So we have to do a lot to make ourselves more productive and everyone else around us more productive. And this is a very key. My entire talk today and message will be about how we've used Qlik and the way we've used Qlik to actually not only improve productivity for the people using and managing Qlik directly, but for the entire enterprise and what that looks like. Right? So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But before we start talking about the next generation, there's a couple of very key errors that Christian made that I really had to correct. One, I have switched to a new role, so my new role is editor for all of customer-facing data channels. But that is the least important one. I am not from Sydney. I'm from Melbourne, but no, I love Sydney. Our biggest Qlik team is in Sydney, and they work out. They're fantastic players, nothing against it. But I'm not, just saying. So, getting in there, a couple of quick things. Why are we in a unique position to talk about data today at ANZ? Data over the last couple of years has got a very, very strong focus within ANZ. And a couple of key things that I'd like to talk about on what actually is visual or visible indicators of that strong focus. We now have a very, very strong executive focus, and as a result, we last couple of years ago, actually a year and a half ago, we appointed Emma Gray as our Chief Data Officer, who's right across the entire enterprise, and looking very, very strongly at how do we use data better. So even in like our board level work that goes on, we are using almost a cliched phrase around data is our crown jewels, and there's a strong realization that we are going to be a very data-driven organization, and that's kind of where our value will be over and above, say, another fintech who can come around and create the next best visual layer on top of a strong banking rail, right? So there's a lot in that. Second, we've embraced open data principles, so we're actually now looking at opening up as much of our data to as much of our enterprise as possible. And one of the things that was kind of, so we're pretty much everything that we now put on, we're kind of questioning whether it needs to be a closed asset or not, which is a very different way to look at it, because traditionally every organization kind of looks at it and goes, is this data set, can this be shared with everyone else or not? Like, I mean, we've got this 10 people who need to know, or this is only for the finance team, or the only risk being, oh my God, this is too risky, we can't share it. So we've reversed that cycle, and we're kind of starting to question everything to go, is there a real reason for this to be contained or not? One of the most things that people will find very striking, we've recently published a dashboard on Qlik with every single corporate card transaction that happens at ANZ attributed to every single employee open. So it's one of those things that you go, isn't there privacy issues in there or things like that? But it's not really, right? Because it is about looking at things very, very differently. It is actually about not looking at whether this particular data set needs to be opened up or not, but it is about every data set. Until you open up and people look at it, you don't know how much they will use and how they will use it. Right? So second key goal. And second, and third, sorry, a key realization that more use is more value. Right? If we contain things, we don't get as much value out of it. If we don't contain it, we have a growing number of data scientists and analysts within the bank. We're now, I think, if any of you followed the transformation journey that ANZ is on at the moment, we're going through something we're calling new ways of working transformation, which really is a massive transformation compared to what we were as an organization. And as a part of that transformation, we're converting everything into funky names for one, tribes and squads and all of that. But basically moving into a very, very non-siloed way of working is really what that's about. And as a part of that, every single squad in our bank, which is mostly customer facing and have any use of data, will have a data analyst in the squad directly, right? Which is a huge shift from where we have been as an organization. So very key and clear focus on usage of data, and that's why I think our story is worth sharing. So all of that will connect into what I'll talk about today, which is enabling self-service analytics, and what does that look like at an enterprise scale, and what do you have to do that, which then, of course, leads into the productivity conversation that we just had, right? Let's talk a little bit about what the last decade of this has looked like. So we've done a lot of really good stuff over the last decade of using analytics, and mostly data analytics, right? So what does that actually look like? Most of you will associate really well with it. So we get some data, we put it into enterprise data warehouse. We've got a really large one, or actually several, like most organizations on the planet. And it kind of goes into a centralized analytics and reporting team, or we've got about 3 of those too. So not really centralized, but severely centralized. When you get an organization our size, you can have a few, but still centralized. And they produce some really amazing dashboards. They kind of understand every business need out there, and then they produce some really good content, and it kind of then gets shared with all the users, and everyone's really happy. And that's been really, really good, right? We've done that really successfully over the last decade. And in doing that, up until about a year and a half ago, we did that successfully, and we already had about 8,000 people using data from clicks, dashboards, and otherwise, right? So it was a very strong community. We were doing some really good stuff already. So why change, right? So looking at where this is getting to, this is again, self-service starts with access to data. If you don't have access to data, there's only so much self-service you can do. So it's a lot about democratizing the power of data and democratizing the data itself, which then connects back into the whole open data conversation that I talked about. It's all a very connected story. So let's look at a little bit deeper on what this actually means, right? How does this actually work today? So what really happens is we have a representative set of users from all the different areas. That's kind of usually how it works. So we've got, I'll take one example, say someone from the digital side of the bank kind of wants to do a bit of a dashboard to go look at the growth chart for mobile banking users within ANZ, give or take. They understand the business really well, they understand what kind of metrics they would want, but they don't really have the skill to utilize an Azure Power BI kind of tool. So they go, okay, fine, we need someone from the reporting analytics team to work with us and create some dashboard. And then great, where's the data coming from? That's coming from our source system. So we've got like hundreds of source systems, but more importantly, digital source systems as well as the core. And then, okay, well, the reporting analytics guy goes, okay, but I don't really understand the core data, so we need someone as an SME. And then the dollar kind of starts, right? So the user goes, okay, I want this kind of dashboard. The reporting analytics guy goes, okay, this hey source guy, I want you to tell me every customer registration that's happened in the last month, and give me a metric around that. The source guy goes, I don't know what you're talking about. Tell me which table you want and which field you want, and only then I can give you the data you want, right? And then this conversation kind of starts and goes on a little bit, and and after all of that kerfuffle is the only way to describe it, something goes back to the users, right? And And I'm like, great, okay, we've now done our jobs and we've kind of gone brilliant. We've produced this beautiful pie chart that describes the growth and the segmentation change in our digital users. And then the users of the system kind of go, all right, great, don't really like it. I want to look at it a bit different. And then the cycle starts again. Right? So it's a very slow process and a huge issue with productivity all across this entire chain. Right? So we don't not only have an issue with the users who actually want access to the data, but we also have an issue with the source who are wasting their time trying to do something that they don't understand. The centralized reporting analytics guy, poor guy, kind of sandwiched in the middle and going, okay, I now have to translate from this end to that end. And for simplistic changes. So whilst we were doing a lot of good stuff, this is how it was progressing, right? Clearly not the most efficient way of doing it. So let's look at what it should be. But before we look at what self-service is, it's very important to understand what it is and what it isn't, right? Because it's not everything and we have to be careful about that. So one, it is definitely enablement for better data-driven decisions. So if you've got a data-driven strategy or like any area which is data-driven or a data-driven organization, which is what we're heading towards, very important to empower people. What it's not an anarchy, right? So what you can't do is have every single person without any lineage management or quality controls publishing all sorts of data sets across the entire organization. Very easily you will lose the power in self-service, because if you start to share metrics and it goes up into any report that then kind of turns into an investigation and turns out that the data that someone pulled was erroneous from an Excel error that they created somewhere, that's it, right? So we do have to be careful about quality and education on how this works. What it is, very much is democratizing the power of data analytics. And finally, it is not a replacement for guided BI. There is a good spot for guided BI for good things. If we're sending a report to the regulator, we actually want to have a standard prescribed format, not necessary to change, send it to them, and off you go. So there is a good spot for that, but for everything else, let's look at what that would be. So for self-service, it's again, even self-service is not really a one-size-fits-all. It's not like everyone would just want to do that. So we've got the first category of self-service users, who we think about as viewers. So viewers are looking at a particular dashboard, and I think in Armstrong's example earlier, you've got one particular version of a chart. You either want to combine a few of these different data metrics together into one spot, or you want to look at the data a little bit different. It's a basic transformation. You're not really looking to get more data in or anything like that. You just want to change it a little bit. So views. We then have a slightly up the curve, explorers, who want to look at some of their own data, do some exploration. These are all the people that are using Excel in anger right now and pivot tables and you name it, but they don't have all the right tools to utilize data properly today. And the third, which is power users. So they are the people who can understand all the way down from the database level for a particular business, going all the way through the top on what sort of metrics should we be using to drive that business, right? The good thing is we are using Click to service this entire spectrum, right? And that's the power of what Sense brings to us. So historically, we've been doing all this with multiple different tool sets and different platforms, but now we're doing this with one, which has got multiple other benefits associated with it, which we'll get into. So setting up a platform is great, but that's nowhere near enough, right? So you could set up a platform and have the exact same process that you had earlier. Let's look at what that actually looks like. Okay? So we talk a little bit about setting up platforms not enough. We talk about propositions, right? So platform is, if you think about the technology layer, I think Armstrong's presentation talked about data, technology, and people. We talk about data, people, process, and technology. It's the four pillars, right? We have to cater for all of it for this to be a successful proposition. So traditionally, when we set up enterprise platforms, we go, great, we've had an idea, an epiphany overnight, eureka moment, like, yeah, we need to put in play and it'll solve all the world's problems. Great. We go, fantastic, let's buy some stuff, let's set up the platform, let's get our engineers to build it, and then buy some licenses. Maybe we know of 50 people who want to use this right now. Let's start with that, and then put in a little bit of capacity, and most of this is built on-prem, so you've got to forecast a little bit out to go. 3 years down the line, we expect maybe, we've got 50 right now. If we had a ridiculous growth, we'd probably get up to 1,000. Let's put that capacity in, costs you too much, takes too much time, but nevertheless, you do it. The problem with this ecosystem is we start, and the first set of, that's a representative set of 50 users, very happy, great. We're starting to utilize the platform, use a little bit of capacity, everything's hunky-dory, brilliant. This starts to take off, we go a few more users, fantastic, we're glad we catered for that extra capacity, and we're starting to use that now. But what happens beyond that, right, is you go grow even further. And now you max out the capacity that you put in, and if you were lucky, it hit your forecast. But actually, no. If you were unlucky, it hit your forecast. Because what you actually want to do is proliferate the use of this entire platform. So it's in your best interest for this to get used even more so. So what happens beyond that? Right? The next 10 that want to come on board, we go, sorry, no licenses, no capacity. It's going to take us 12 months to set it up, and by the way, can you pay for it? Right? And that will stop them using this platform and capability like there's no tomorrow. And not only that, it becomes the point where self-service starts to break. Right? So if we do self-service and we have to have a conversation with that end user about, oh, you need to buy a license, and this is how you go about doing that. And then just the mere fact that they have to have a conversation with their manager about getting a $300 license will stop them from using data. Right? It's as big as that. So it's not enough for us to just set up a standard enterprise platform the way we've done that before. So what have we done this time to be a bit different? Number one, we've looking to convert it to a complete proposition, and what does that actually look like, right? So first part that we've done is we've partnered with Qlik, and I think we mentioned it before. It's a number that we picked, which is 48,000, but it basically is representative of one for every single person within ANZ up front. So we partnered with Qlik and said, if we're going to democratize the power of data, we cannot have licenses as one of our issues. Get rid of it. So fantastic partnership there. We've gone, we will never ever have to talk about licenses for anyone to utilize this ecosystem ever again, right? We're there. Second, we actually took completely that platform management piece out of anyone's hands. So we looked at, we've got the technology data space that I belong to, and we said, it's a little bit of a false economy to try and internally charge users back for our licenses, which is a typical problem in organizations our size. We took that away completely. It was a bit of a, pardon my French, shit fight with the finance team, because they just can't deal with us not recovering costs. So it's a massive false economy within the organization to try and do that. Well, let's just not do it. We will just not recover costs, do it once and for all. Same thing with every single capacity. So what we do now is we run weekly forums for all of our Qlik customers dialing into conferences. We've got a full backlog that we manage. We forecast our demand a year in the future, and we add capacity proactively. So we never ever have a conversation with anyone about needing to pay for capacity or licenses or anything like that. We're taking this one step further now, and we're working with Qlik to create a completely auto-scaling hybrid environment, in which case we don't even have to talk about it ourselves. It just happens, right? And we can get there. So with this ecosystem, those outlier users are now happy because they don't really have to have the conversation. No one has to talk about what I need to do to utilize this platform. Here's everything published in our complete intranet. You go and use it, right? But that's great. And we've put in a proposition, we've sorted out the licenses problems, and we've sorted out some of the capacity issues. Well, what about process, right? It's fantastic to say that we've done that now, but if we keep following the exact same process that we have for the last decade, we will end up where we were. We definitely want to avoid that. So let's look at what that actually looked like before, right? And more importantly, what is the future of that? So we're using DevOps to completely change our process around management of information within the organization and orchestration of things within the Qlik ecosystem as well. Let's talk a little bit about that. So the pre-DevOps world, before we set this up, what happened was, here's a great user who's come along. Now we've taken care of all the licenses, all the platform capacity, so it'd be great. I want to build a dashboard. Let's do that. So it interacts with the Qlik ecosystem and creates a fantastic dashboard. But like I said, self-service does not mean anarchy, which means we still have to do some sort of checks to make sure that this is not bad quality data being proliferated through the organization, because that is much worse. So we go, okay, great. We need to do a bit of a chain control. We need to look at performance of your dashboard, because if it goes to a board member and it takes 30 seconds to respond, then they're going to come back to it again. Right? Second, compliance. Like, we're a bank, so we need to be compliant. If we put Singapore data on a system that is non-compliant, that's it, and end of story. Guidelines. We need to make sure that we are falling within the guidelines of particular ecosystem. So we are proliferating open data, but what we don't want to do is pre-publish our revenue numbers to everyone. Dangerous thing, right? And then finally, whether we've got the right capacity. So pre-DevOps, this is what we have to look at. It was like, great, clean bill of health, everything's fine. Hey, Mr. Administrator, can you please publish this thing? And the administrator interacts with the system, publishes it out, and this thing gets to all the users. Fantastic. But if you look at what's going on in there, there's a number of manual steps. And now, with the kind of deployments we are looking at, so we started with 8,000 users a couple of years ago, which grew from 50 or 100 when we started. We're already at about, I think as of last count, 18,000, going up to 24 and beyond. And if we started doing this for every single one of those 24,000, we would have to have a team the size of half of ANZ to just try and manage that process. So we can't do that. It's inefficient, we're in the middle, bad productivity. So what do we do? We replace that end of the spectrum with a DevOps system, right? So what we try to do is automate everything that we would possibly want to check as much as possible through a DevOps system. So what happens now is the users created a dashboard and they've kind of gone, great, I'm happy with it, I'll follow the guidelines, go on. And all of this starts with, we'll talk about the ecosystem a little bit, but this doesn't actually start with Qlik. This starts with our demand management system. So our entire Qlik ecosystem is now connected into our Atlassian stack, which we use for DevOps. So our journey for building a dashboard doesn't actually begin in Qlik. It begins by you creating a ticket in Jira. And as soon as you create a ticket in Jira, it automatically creates a project within Qlik. So now we've got the full metadata associated with what you're trying to do, what should be the expected result of what you're trying to do, and where it should be going. So the DevOps system goes, great. I've now got a dashboard, the user's just gone, ready for QA, I've done a whole lot of checks, right? But the trick with this DevOps ecosystem is it's when you start, it's not going to be 100% automated. And it will take a while for us to get 100% automated. So it's important for us to work out what's the exception management process. So what we've done is defined a number of different life cycles, and we say, if this is what you're trying to do, a small life cycle event, it's almost 100%, not almost, it is 100% automated, does checks, all the checks automatically, goes through, publishes, right? But if there is an exception, we've got a small team that looks at exceptions coming out of this DevOps ecosystem. And part of their job is to look at exceptions with a standard SLA. But the other part of their job is to basically continually automate themselves out of the loop. And it's important for them to do that because they cannot deal with the influx of what we've got coming on. So that team is responsible for reliability. It's also responsible for automation of all these checks. It is then also responsible for making sure that the users are well supported. So they are the Uber geeks and Uber nerds and Uber business people all at the same time. So they go, great, I've looked at the exception, fantastic, resolved, DevOps system, please go ahead and publish. And that DevOps system actually goes and publishes the dashboard into the right zone. So our ecosystem is split into 3 zones. We have self-service sites, which we start the development in. And even within the self-service, we've got 3 or 4 different types of self-service, catering to the different users that we talked about. It then publishes to, depending on what you're trying to do, either an assurance site or a consumption site, which the DevOps system does. But the most important thing is, it is no manual deployment, no manual code control. It's fully enabled and fully automated as much as possible, with the exception of exceptions. But we are looking to get rid of that exception zone, and when we do, it's going to be a zero-touch process. That's where we're heading to it. So, how do we enable this? Right? It's a fantastic theory, but how are we doing it? So I'm going to share a little bit about what we're using. So talk about Jira. That's where our workflow actually starts. We've got a full lifecycle management set up in Jira, and we go start a ticket. Here's a dashboard that we're trying to build. And then the next kind of swim lane, if you will, is ready for QA. So the developer automatically moves the cart into QA. The DevOps system does all the checks and kind of works out whether there is a need for an exception process or not. If there is, it kind of drops it into the exception queue, which then creates a backlog ticket for our exceptions team or the platform team, and they kind of clear out. They go, yep, exception cleared, and kind of just goes to production. That's what we're doing now. We use Bamboo for all the backend orchestration, so Jira is the front end because it's the user-friendly end of it, but the entire backend orchestration goes through Bamboo. We've got Bitbucket, so all of our scripts are going into Bitbucket, so full, pretty much any code that we write has scripts goes into Git, which is Bitbucket. We're using OpenConfluence for full documentation, so everyone can have a look at what we're doing, how we're doing, and why we're doing it. And also the user journeys associated with doing all these different types of setups. All of this would not be enabled if we didn't have as strong an API capability as we do in Sense, because all the Bamboo orchestration goes through ClickSense APIs. So we've literally taken the front end out and said, Bamboo, talk to ClickSense directly, and we're also working with Click to improve the API capability for those exceptions that we haven't been able to automate yet. Finally, Artifactory for our artifact repository, because if you having Click a little bit, we create mostly binary artifacts, which Bitbucket and Git is not particularly great to handle, and we put all of that stuff into Artifactory. So what this gets us, right, is a fantastic suite to market. We've reduced our from if there is a zero exception process, our development of dashboard to production is 1 day, and we're looking to bring it down to minutes. Right? Basically, if we automate the entire process out, there's nothing in the middle. You hit a button, it goes all the way through published. Second, it's reducing our total cost of ownership very significantly, because we don't and no longer have a significant part of our organization trying to build and maintain the entire stack, because most of it's automated. Our exceptions team is not an extremely large team because most of it is automated again. So it's reducing significantly our total cost of ownership, and it's giving us a huge amount of flexibility. There is very little conflict between people trying to use the system and people trying to prevent bad things from happening to the entire system. It's kind of usually where the entire process falls down, and we've tried to correct that. So, in summary, the things that we need to do to make sure that we enable self-service analytics. One, a good partner that allows you to do that. You could do everything you want, but if there is no partner like Click and the API setup that we've got, you just cannot do it. Right? Second, it's not just about setting up a platform. It is very much about moving to the proposition. The setup of the platform was a significant piece, but now our entire effort is going into setting up, we have set up the complete operating model around it. We've got a full community of users that come together every week or 2 weeks when they need to. We have a full backlog management of everything that's going on within the entire platform. We also use that to forecast our demand for the next year or 2 years. And in the background, we're looking to alleviate all of that, right? So once we're looking to see how we can create an hybrid deployment with an auto-scaling and auto-healing features, which means we just don't even think about bandwidth anymore. It just happens. But none of that would be possible if I had to go, an auto-scaling system can scale, but but we've got to work out whether or not you've got enough licenses to scale. If you have that, you just can't create it. So it's a full ecosystem of things that we're talking about. Big on DevOps for faster change, and more importantly, with a significantly reduced risk, because change control is all about risk management. And so we're not saying that we're going to take more risk, we're just saying we're going to automate how we manage risk, which is actually a lot less risk. Much lower human error possibility. Everybody's confident that the process is being followed every single time. There is no audit necessary because the system doing everything, not a human. And we're continually going further and further in our journey to do that. Open data principles. You could build everything. If you don't have access to the data, this goes nowhere. Right? So very, very important. And finally, self-service-led data discovery, which is what we have enabled as a path to enterprise delivery. So we allow our users to discover data, provide an easy pathway to move, provide all the guiding principles that they need to have to make this happen end to end. And that is basically how we make our next generation more prosperous. More time for questions if you've got any.
Yeah, come on, something's with a prize.
Yes.
So if you've got this DevOps it's where you can publish reports and dashboards really quickly.
Yeah.
But do you control things like versioning or just multiple dashboards are being published that is quite similar, right? Or so you end up at the other end, if you can get these dashboards through so quickly.
Yeah.
So the user is going to become overwhelmed with which dashboard to choose and then looking at the right dashboard.
Great question. Yep. So I don't know if everyone heard that. Did everyone hear that? Anyone not hear that? Good. What we've done, what I haven't talked about here is the full operating model that we've got around this entire ecosystem. So the way we've done that is there's always a conflict with a central team policing that sort of an action, right? So what we've done is rather than a central team policing that action, we've given that policing power back into the domains. So our entire ecosystem is split into about 6 or 7 domains. I'll take a couple of examples. So our finance area is one domain. Our HR area is probably another domain. Our digital space is a third one, and so on, right? And what we've done is assigned stewards for every domain. And the responsibility of the stewards is to ensure that what we're publishing isn't duplicate, is accurate, and we've established a process to put in those stewards very carefully. So we've started with the entire stewardship being centrally with one team who understands what we are doing. We've then created a certification process for stewards. So to go, here's the kind of design principles. If you demonstrate that you follow these design principles properly, then you are allowed to become a steward. And we haven't put a strict number of how many. If you've got like 4 people who are really well at stewarding, then yeah, go for it, right? And the way we certify that is, one, we run them through everything that we need to do. But more importantly, every time the first 2 times that a steward publishes a dashboard, our centralized team actually checks for compliance, right? And compliance is from a perspective of, is this duplicating anything? Have you actually followed the right kind of guidelines? Are you making sure that the data quality is right? And if you prove that for 2 times you followed all the right policies, we give control to you, right? And until you do something stupid, you're on your own, right? And you go for it, because basically that stewardship is best with the particular domain that is trying to do that work, because they understand what they're publishing and how their dashboards are different to the other ones that they are publishing. And they're then also responsible for making sure that bad data and multiple of the same is not going out of that domain. Then there's another layer. The entire BI community of stewards comes together every once so often, kind of talks about everything happening within their own domain. So in kind of Scrum concept, it's a nexus that we follow, and then kind of going layer by layer. That's how we prevent that.
So that you mentioned the self-service. So I want to know, is it a self-service portal for internal users or for external clients or something?
We're using, our current deployment of Click is internally facing. So it is, but that's at the moment probably the biggest thing we do need to do is enable every single business within ANZ to utilize data better. So this is very much focused internally towards ANZ.
Okay, so if the customer wants to access that kind of information, then will publish dashboard, will the customer able to access the published dashboard?
So I think I might do a bit of a sales pitch on your behalf. For sure. So the Click ecosystem does allow to do that. There's different licensing terms you can agree with Click around publishing directly to customers as opposed to internal users, because I think the licensing model is a bit different. We haven't looked at that end of it yet because we currently use purpose-built visualizations within our digital assets to do that, but there's nothing preventing you from doing that. So I took the question.
I'll tell you about a couple of things about Sydney.
Yeah.
Another question is about the server setup behind the studio. So if you basically you need to set up a server cluster in the company or everything online.
No, so we own this entire deployment, and everything is set up within our data center. We've got the 3 sites that we talked about. Each one of them is a cluster of between 4 to 6 reasonably large servers. We started there, but I think our journey is going more towards not having to set up additional servers on-prem. So we are currently upgrading our stack. So as I did mention, I think our deployment's gone through the roof, and just everybody's starting to utilize this better. So we are upgrading our current stack, but what we're moving towards is if we can dynamically move workloads and dashboards into an auto-scaling system on the cloud, then we just don't have to do this ever again, right? So what should happen ideally is you try and access a dashboard, and if that dashboard is simultaneously being accessed by 4,000 people, it moves to a more highly available cluster directly on the cloud and gets published from there. Completely seamless to the user, but better from an SRE perspective. Sorry, there was one question back there. I'll take that first and then come to you.
Thank you. Two quick questions that sort of relate to the first one. Is there some sort of standardised catalogue of reports where staff can look to find what they're after? And also, do you know if there's more reports now than there were in the whole?
Right. I think I understand the question. So yes, we do have a couple of sort of catalogs. So one, we've got a catalog of our data assets on what data is available in which system, which we actually publish on Click. Second, all of our sort of dashboards that get published are, one, I think everything that is open is published directly on the Click landing page, so you can search from there. The ones that are not are published within another dashboard in Click, right? So every dashboard that's out there, along with other metrics as well. So we publish who's using which dashboard, what sort of usage is it actually getting, what sort of response times it is getting, and all of that information is completely open. Yeah.
And the second one, from compared with the old way of doing it, the normal version versus moving to Click, do you know what you think the more reports?
Oh, good question. So I think our journey was a little bit different. It wasn't, so when we moved into Click kind of happened maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. What we've now done in the last year is really accelerated the enterprise use of that. So yes, we do have significantly higher user base and consequently higher number of reports and views and dashboards coming through. But it wasn't really because we moved to Click, it was because we moved to the proposition that I talked about rather than a platform. Right? We're also looking to consolidate a lot of our other assets and coming into Click for most of them.
My question is, what sort of automated documentation of contracts is going to Confluence?
Good question. So it's not really a whole lot of automated documentation going to Confluence. It's more everything around the usage of the entire platform, the way it's built, plus all the kind of user journeys, journey flows that you can follow. As an example, if if you're one of the viewers, what are the things you can do and how you can go about doing them. The other ones are if you're one of the power users and you want to be able to utilize this kind of data, here's the catalog, here's how you get access, here's how you do that, so the entire journey is published. The one thing I did forget to mention is that in this entire journey, we've also now got worked with Click to enable a training program for the entire organization. So the Click Continuous Classroom program that Click provides, we have enterprise licenses for that as well. So basically we publish this entire thing and go, anyone who wants to get started, if you don't already have an exposure to Click, go, and it's kind of not published directly from within Click, but published through our enterprise training portal. So anyone going into our training portal can go search for how to be a Click developer and then go through single click, single sign-on into the Click Continuous Classroom, do the entire training, come back into Confluence, read everything that now probably makes a little bit more sense now that you've done the training, and then go on and use it. Well, I'm just hoping you've got enough gifts for everyone. Please.
Something that's not quite clear to me is how the data sources are being managed, because one of the aspects that we've heard about Click is the ability to draw in various types of data. Are you allowing your users to draw in any data they want, or are you controlling it to say, this is the data available to you, you can only draw data from here?
It's a bit of both. So if you can probably imagine, we've got a number of different data sources coming in from within the bank, right? We've got our enterprise data warehouse. We've got a reasonably large big data ecosystem as well. And we're now moving into, and when I say we've got a warehouse, we've got like several warehouses of different types. We've created independent connections into all of them from within Click, so centrally managed connection pools. If you're trying to do some self-service analysis and you want to drag and drop an Excel sheet directly into Click, go for it. But if you're trying to access a data source that exists within the bank, we've got mostly pre-created connections. And your access credentials will determine what data you can access from within those sources. So we don't use Click as a policing mechanism. We go, if you've got access to data from that source, there is a service account-based connections going into that source already, but your particular credential will determine which of those data sets and which row level, field level controls you've got access to and what data you can pull into the platform and use. On the other side, what we've done is worked across the entire globe with every regulator that we have to work with and certified our Click platform to hold restricted, highly trusted level of data from any geography on the platform. So we don't actually have to stop and check whether someone bringing on the data to the platform is going to breach a compliance or not, because it is going to be always compliant with everything. So what you have access to will determine what you can do. And that access is controlled based on whether you've done, as an example, if you're trying to handle data from the Singapore geography, you've got to go through the Singapore mass compliance training and a couple other things. If you've done all those, the EDW team will give you access to that on your credential. And then when you deploy into Click from a self-service site, then you can access those things. When you deploy into the publishing site, all that data is going through service accounts, which have got access to everything.
Maybe one more question before lunch. Did you
Centralized warehouse is accessing the system or individual system the user can access?
Sorry.
The user can access an individual system or centralized warehouse?
So I would love to say we've got one, but we've got several, right? So it depends where it is, and this is where our catalog comes in handy. So the catalog kind of talks about what data is within our EDW, what data is within our big data stack, what data is within our other warehouses, and then the users kind of use that to work out where it is. We are looking to consolidate all of that into one or at most two. We're leaning pretty heavily on our big data ecosystem to do that. But on another note, we're also expanding our entire ecosystem towards the cloud. So that'll probably help, and I think hopefully that'll be the end of that. Sorry, you had a question?
So how long will it take for ANZ to deploy this Click, from the conception to deployment?
It's probably a two-part question. So I think the Click journey at ANZ probably started about 3-4 years ago, but when we decided to convert it to enterprise and move to Sense, it still took us about 10 months to do, but my personal view is about 8 of those months were a waste, because as our organizations go, We spent a few months trying to acquire servers, and someone's going to hate me for saying this at ANZ, but our servers actually landed on the wrong data center because we've got a few of them. And we actually spent a couple of weeks trying to move the servers over to the right data center, right? So those are the issues that we just don't want to have to deal with anymore. And hence why we're working with Qlik to go more towards a cloud-based ecosystem. We are still nascent in that journey, so hopefully the next time I'm talking about this, we will be talking about that. But all up, actually, if you don't have the issues that an organization our size has, setting this up shouldn't take more than 4 to 8 weeks, give or take.